Welcome to Hospice Explained. This podcast is intended as an educational aid and is only a resource to begin to understand the end-of-life season. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please always seek advice from your physician or qualified members of your healthcare team with any questions regarding a medical condition.
Welcome to Hospice Explained. This is episode number 169. This is going to be a rebroadcast of Hospice Encounters, episode number 12. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to Hospice Encounters. In this podcast, we'll share hospice and end-of-life stories in a safe and encouraging environment. We hope you find some hope, healing, and comfort by hearing from others' encounters, no matter what season you may be in.
Welcome, Alison Potter, palliative RN, to Hospice Encounters.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So Alison is a volunteer with Give a Mile. She also has her own website and is in all the usual spots, Facebook, Instagram, and did you say, was there a third?
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Oh, yes. Expected Outcome. Alison helps with grief. She helps with, well, why don't you tell us about what your business helps with, and then we'll talk about a few of the deathbed phenomenon.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So I'm in Calgary, which is a city of about 1.5 million people. So I started my business to provide seminars and facilitate other speakers to give seminars on things related to death, dying, loss, grief, and bereavement. And I also run support groups, a grief cafe, a pet loss support group, and a support group for those who've lost a loved one to medical assistance in dying, which is legal across Canada. And my seminars really, they run the range. I do one where we teach families how to provide practical care to someone who's becoming more physically dependent because, people want to stay home. They don't want to end up going to the hospital or moving into a residential hospice always. So, we just kind of do the top to toe way to care people, change sheets underneath them, all of those sorts of things. I have someone who does a seminar on rituals in life and death. I do meet a death doula. There's, it's sort of an increasing awareness of death doulas and the support they can provide. So they can actually come and listen to a death doula talk for a couple of hours and ask questions. And then one of my favorite ones is Deathbed Phenomena, which is presented by Margot, who's a palliative colleague of mine. We've both been in palliative care for many, many years. And so Margot talks about the history, which is fascinating, sort of from the deathbed phenomena, and talks about many studies that have been done. It's actually one of the only, and I'm using Margot's words here, inverted commas, woo-woo things that actually has scientific basis and recognition, because there have been studies done, which I think is great, because often, people, if someone is experiencing deathbed phenomena, will sort of brush it off, oh, they're in a delirium, or, it's the medication, or it's, they're not getting enough oxygen. And Margot's able to disprove that with all of the studies she talks about, that in fact, this is very real and happens to many people, and also teaches us as sort of family and caregivers how we should be responding when someone is perhaps seeing something towards the end of their life. Not to sort of shut it down, but to be curious and explore. And and of course, between Margot and I and our colleagues, we have lots of anecdotal stories about deathbed phenomena. And I just love that seminar. I just love being able to share that information. And hopefully, if somebody they know is experiencing that they can then be curious. And it's so rich, when people are having that experience.
Oh, definitely. Well, I think I want to listen to Margot too.
You do.
Alison, why don't you give us you must have a few stories of these deathbed phenomena.
Yeah, I do. I think one of the interesting things that Margot brings up from the research that she's done on it is that when people appear to people who are dying, it's often in the left corner of the room. as opposed to the right. Sometimes it's the right, but it's mostly the left. And I've certainly been in patients' rooms in residential hospice where I look over my shoulder because I think someone's standing behind me because they're gazing so intently at someone. I think a couple of my favorite stories from the hospice. One of them, there was a patient who was very end of life. His wife was staying in the room with him. She was absolutely exhausted. She very much wanted to be holding his hand when he took his last breath. But she was just, she said, I just have to nap. So she went into sort of the lazy boy recliner in the room and was napping. And the staff were just, the gentleman was very close to the end of his life. They were just sort of popping in quietly to make sure that he was okay and that she was just sleeping soundly. And then randomly, not the whole building, but just the smoke detector in his bedroom alarmed.
Yeah.
And so the nurses ran in to silence it, obviously. And as they silenced it, they realized that his breathing had changed and he was going to be taking his last breath any minute.
Okay.
And they were able to wake the wife up and say, he's going to be taking his last breath. And so she was able to be holding his hand when he died. Now, that's not specifically a deathbed phenomena. It's just kind of one of those unexplained end of life mysteries. But one that I experienced myself with a patient, true deathbed phenomena. This patient was very end of life. And so when I was up on the nursing floor, I would just sort of pop in and, see how she was doing. And I was surprised when I walked in that she was awake. And so I said, "Oh, hi, how you doing?" She goes, "I'm so good." She said, "My dog Fido came to visit." And I went, "Oh, wow, that's lovely."
Wow.
What kind of a dog's Fido? So she told me. And she goes, "He came right here next to the bed and he stuck his nose between the bars and he was licking my fingers." And I said, "Oh, that's so sweet." I said, "You feel free if he's here. You just call the nurses. They'll take the side rail down." I said, "And I'm fine if he gets up on the bed with you. That's fine." And she said, "Oh, thank you." Anyway, and then she just drifted back to sleep. She was, really very end of life. I was surprised that we were conversing. Anyway, I left and I'm walking back to my office. And the patient's daughter has gone out for lunch and she's on her way back. And I said, your mum was so thrilled that Fido came to visit. And she just looked at me and she went, "Fido died 2 years ago."
Oh.
And I was like, "Oh, really?" I said, "Well, Fido came to visit your mum." And as with deathbed phenomena, patients are comforted by it. They're not scared by it. And it's just a beautiful thing. Patients who say to you, "Yeah, so I had a dream last night that I was getting a train somewhere." And instead of saying, "Oh, well, that's you're not getting train anywhere. You're in residential hospice." You just say, "Oh, wow, that's great. Do you know where you were going?" "No, no, I don't know where I was going." And, "Well, was there anybody on the train with you?" "I couldn't see who it was, but I think I'm getting ready to see who's there." So just being curious, like, "Oh, wow, who's there? Are you taking anything with you? Who's waiting for you?" I mean, it's just beautiful when people, are seeing their loved ones or knowing that they're traveling to be with their loved ones. I had a lady who condition was changing very quickly. And so I called the two sons and they were about a 6-hour drive away. And they'd sort of been, as much as we'd been giving them information, in a little bit of denial, that their mum was so close to the end of life. And now they were both desperate to get there. And, her condition continued to change. Now, when she was admitted, the nurse admitting her said, "Wow, that sun's really bright in your eyes. Do you want me to close the blinds for you?" And she said, "No, no, I just love feeling the sun on my face. Please leave it." So anyway, as this lady was getting closer to the end of life, we all kept looking out of the window, waiting for the sons to get there. And they came rushing up into her room. And I just sort of sat quietly in the corner because I knew she was going to be taking her last breath soon. And she died a few minutes after they got there. And as I sat there, it was just like this sunbeam from nowhere. There hadn't been a lot of sun coming into the room. We had a lot of big trees outside.
Uh-huh.
So it was only certain times where the sun would come. And all of a sudden, this sunlight flooded the room. And I watched it like a shadow just creeping up from sort of her mid chest all the way up, lighting her face up with the sunlight. And then her son looked at me and he goes, "Is she smiling?" And I said, yes. Yes, she's smiling. And she just had this incredible smile on her face.
Nice.
And they were just so comforted, just that they'd made it, obviously,
Right.
but that she was so peaceful. Just she was just lit up like an angel,
Right.
just this beautiful sort of aura. So whatever she was seeing, she was experiencing beauty and peace with it.
And that is the perfect way to tell it. Beauty and peace.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think one thing that I wanted to emphasize is the phenomenon. It really, I think it's one of those ways to help you know that your loved one's dying soon.
Mm.
And I'm not saying it always is, but I think it can really help you. Like you said, the sons were having a hard time, but knowing somebody's having these peaceful
Mhm.
situations, whether it be flying or trains. I had an aunt who said she dreamed she was up at the pearly gate. She like,
Yeah.
I don't know, she felt like she was having an out of body experience. And this was the night before or night and a half before she died.
Mhm.
And and it was just like, okay, Aunt Betty's gonna die. I literally told everybody, okay, this is it.
Yeah.
And everybody's like,
Yeah.
are you sure? And it was like there was not a lot of other
Yeah.
symptoms, but I said, yeah. I said, don't ask me
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
Gut feeling,
Yeah.
going with it.
And Margot talks about that, I mean, the majority of them are within the few days, before someone is at the very end of their life. More commonly reported with women than men, not surprising because a lot of men probably think, oh, I'm not going to share that. People will think that I'm crazy. More believed by hospice nurses.
Okay.
Still many physicians who want to write it off as, not getting enough oxygen or the medications. But Margot talks about delirium versus deathbed phenomena and how you can tell the difference. This is not people seeing creepy crawlies on the wall.
Right.
This is not people being restless and agitated and distressed and hearing voices. This is something peaceful that brings them peace, that brings their families peace, and we want people to talk about it because sometimes it's one family member who maybe experiences it, and if they say it out loud, then that can bring comfort to other family members, or maybe the other family members have experienced it with their loved one as well and didn't want to say anything because they thought, well, that's kind of crazy. I went to sit on mum's bed and she's like, oh, well, careful, my mum's sitting there.
Wow.
you know so they might kind of think, well, I don't want to talk about that, but we should, because it's rich. I just encourage people to be curious and ask questions. If they're like, don't sit on the bed, mum's there, and just say, oh, okay. And this funny story came up from someone in our audience where she was with a relative who said, oh, my mum came to visit me, and she said, oh, that's lovely. Her mum had died previously.
Mhm.
Oh, that's lovely. And she goes and she said, was there anything special about the visit? And
Interesting.
this person said, she was naked.
Oh,
And we're like, oh, okay. So, I mean, it's just so interesting, the details that people have. I have no idea why this woman came naked to visit.
I've never heard of that kind of story.
No, I haven't. It's just like being curious, right?
Right.
To ask. And if you ask people who are experiencing deathbed phenomena, is this scary to you? It's always no. It's not scary.
Good.
And not always tied to sort of like it crosses the boundaries of religions and cultures and countries.
Right.
It is truly international. If you are deeply religious, it doesn't mean that you will experience it more. Like the evidence, the studies that have been done don't support that. It may or may not be someone you know. Sometimes it might be an angel, but it tends to be someone that the person knows who's died before them, which is beautiful, I think.
Right. Oh, I 100% agree.
And, it's not like the movies where everybody is kind of wide awake until 30 seconds before they take their last breath. Oftentimes people are, unresponsive for those last 1, 2, or 3 days, sometimes even longer. And so if deathbed phenomena are happening in those last few days, then sometimes again, doesn't mean they're not having them. It's just that we don't know that they're having having those experiences. So, yeah.
No, that makes sense. That makes total sense.
My mantra has always been people remember the death of their loved one until their own last breath. And so we have to make it be the best it can be. And that's, that's what I live by. I will do whatever it takes, because this impact will be with you. You know this, right? Someone will start telling you a death story about how somebody died and it was traumatic because they didn't understand or because it was traumatic. And it feels like that person died last week and they died 20 years ago. And they carry that story. And so we have to make it be the best it can be, because that's the gift that those of us who love dying and death can give to people. And we're not just giving it in that moment, we're giving it for the rest of the family's life. They will always remember when it's been the best it could be, right? We know it's sad. We can't take that away, but for them to just feel that everything was done and that we took care of their loved one even after they died. I just think those things are really important.
I agree. Thank you, Alison. I
Yeah.
appreciate you so much for coming on Hospice Encounters and blessing us with a few stories. Thank you so much.
Oh gosh, I mean, I could talk about death and dying till the cows come home, right?
Well, maybe we'll do it again. How about that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, everyone, and you can find Alison at expectedoutcome, is it .com?
.ca.
.ca. Okay, I'm glad I asked. And then also at Give a Mile. And if you want to hear more about Give a Mile, please listen to Hospice Explained, episode number 50.
Thank you so much for having me on. I love to be able to share stories, and I just really appreciate you doing your podcast so that those of us that like to talk about dying and death have a place to share our voice.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on Hospice Explained. Think about ways you can make a difference in someone's life. Also, please subscribe and share this podcast with anyone who would benefit from listening. Thank you.